Greetings, one and all, once again to Exploring Arda, where I am your host, Jackson, and I'm going through a bunch of Tolkien's works other than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So, yeah, this is another Silmarillion episode, obviously, but since this is chapter, hold on a minute, I should have looked at this before, 21, that's right, 21, it's of Túrin Turambar, but this is a very long chapter. It's like 30 or so pages, and of course with like full text it takes a while, as you guys have already seen from the Tale of Beren and Luthien, where it took me over an hour and a half. So that means this time I'm only going to read half of the chapter, so this is part 1 of chapter 21, and part 2 will be some other time, because I know how long it was last time. So that's kind of my plan. I did find a spot in the middle of the chapter where I will be stopping. It is at a point, well, yeah, I'll let you guys kind of see from now on. That means you have to listen to the whole thing to see where I stop the chapter. So, yeah, if you guys want to be part of the show, I just want to let you guys know right here in the front that you can be part of the show. Just to have like little chats or talks or something like that, just send me over an email at thelandsofordia@gmail.com. It'd be really cool to kind of chat with whoever's listening or watching. It'd be awesome. I would appreciate all the effort and just the willingness, I guess, to just sit down, have a nice talk, and share it with everybody. So if you'd like that, send me over an email, and we can schedule something. That'd be awesome. So we are just going to go right into the chapter, because I got the introductions done. You already know what the show's about if you've been listening the whole time. So, yeah, here we go. Chapter 21 of Túrin Turambar. Rhiann, daughter of Belegond, was the wife of Huar, son of Galdor, and she was wedded to him 2 months before he went with Hurin, his brother, to the Nirnieth Arnoediad. When no tidings came of her lord, she fled into the wild, but she was aided by the grey elves of Mithrim, and when her son Tuor was born, they fostered him. Then Rhiann departed from Hithlum, and going to the Had en Nidengin, I think so, she laid herself down upon it and died. Morwen, daughter of Beregond, was the wife of Hurin, lord of Dor Lomin, and their son was Túrin, who was born in the year that Beren, Erchamion, I think, came upon Luthien in the forest of Neldareth. A daughter they had also, who was called Lalaith, which is laughter, and she was beloved by Túrin her brother. But when she was 3 years old, there came a pestilence to Hithlum, born on an evil wind out of Angband, and she died. Now after the Nirnieth Arnoediad, it's always, sorry, the Elvish stuff is very hard to pronounce, so just kind of forgive me on that part at least. So after that, Morwen abode still in Dor Lomin, for Túrin was but yet 8 years old, and she was again with child. Those days were evil, for the Easterlings that came into Hithlum despised the remnant of the people of Hador, and they oppressed them, and took their lands and their goods, and enslaved their children. But so great was the beauty and majesty of the Lady of Dor Lomin, that the Easterlings were afraid, and dared not to lay hands upon her or on her household. Sorry, I gotta make sure I'm here. And they whispered among themselves, saying that she was perilous, and a witch, skilled with magic and in league with the elves. Yet she was now poor and without aid, save that she was succored secretly by a kinswoman of Hurin named Erin, whom Brada, an Easterling, had taken as his wife, and Morwen feared greatly that Túrin would be taken from her and enslaved. Therefore it came into her heart to send him away in secret, and to beg King Thingol to harbour him, for Beren, son of Barahir, was her father's kinsman, and he had been moreover a friend of Hurin ere evil befell. There in the autumn of the year of lamentation, Morwen sent Túrin forth over the mountains with 2 aged servants, bidding them find entry, if they could, into the kingdom of Doriath. Thus was the fate of Túrin woven, which is foretold in that lay that is called Narn-i-Hin Hurin, the tale of the children of Hurin, and is the longest of all the lays that speak of those days. Here that tale is told in brief, for it is woven with the fate of the Silmarils and of the elves, and it is called the Tale of Grief, for it is sorrowful, and in it are revealed most evil works of Morgoth Boglair. Okay, cool. So we get a little bit of an introduction of the hardships that Morwen has to face, kind of like from the beginning and the whole thing of Rion pretty much giving birth to Tuar, and then from Tuar comes Túrin. Sorry, there was a little bug there. And so yeah, there's a lot of like hardships. There's a lot of death like right away because it is wartime, but it's also, I guess, considered fantasy, like medieval fantasy. So of course a pestilence or a plague came through and pretty much killed a whole bunch of people too. Who was it? Okay, Morwen. Hold on. Oh yeah, Morwen's daughter is the one who actually died. So that only leaves Hurin left. So that's kind of, I mean Túrin, sorry. Which is terrible. That's a terrible way to start off, I guess, I suppose. But I mean, it is wartime in a fantasy setting, so a little difficult. I do have the Children of Hurin. It's right over here, which we will get to eventually after the Silmarillion, as I mentioned from the last episode, I think. Obviously, you guys probably already know that after the Silmarillion, we're going to go back into the extensive works, or maybe a different one, and we'll come back to the Silmarillion extended tales another day. Still up in the air, so let me know. Now we're just going to go back into the story here. So, in the first beginning of the year, Morwen gave birth to her child, the daughter of Hurin, and she named her Nienor, which is mourning. But Túrin and his companions, passing through great perils, came at last to the borders of Doriath, and there they were found by Beleg Strongbow, chief of the march wardens of King Thingol, who led them to Menegroth. Then Thingol received Túrin and took him even to his own fostering, in honor of Hurin the Steadfast, for Thingol's mood was changed towards the houses of the elf friends. Thereafter messengers went north to Hithlum, bidding Morwen leave Dor Lúmin and return with them to Doriath. But still she would not leave the house in which she had dwelt with Hurin, and when the elves departed she sent them with the dragon helm of Dor Lúmin, greatest of the heirlooms of the house of Hador. Túrin grew fair and strong in Doriath, but he was marked with sorrow. For 9 years he dwelt in Thingol's halls, and during that time his grief grew less. For messengers went at times to Hithlum, and returning there brought better tides of Morwen and Nienor. But there came a day when the messengers did not return out of the north, and Thingol would send no more. Then Túrin was filled with fear for his mother and his sister, and in grimness of heart he went before the king and asked for mail and sword, and he put on the dragon helm of Dor Lúmin, and went out to battle on the marches of Doriath, and became the companion in arms of Beleg Strongbow. And when 3 years had passed, Túrin returned again to Menegroth, but he came from the wild and was unkept, and his gear and garments were way-worn. Now one there was in Doriath, of the people of the Nandor, high in the councils of the king. Seiros was his name. He had long begrudged to Túrin the honor he received as Thingol's foster son. And seated opposite to him at the board, he taunted him, saying, "If the men of Hithlum are so wild and fell, of what sort are the women of that land? Do they run like deer, clad only in their hair?" Then Túrin in great anger took up a drinking vessel, and cast it at Seiros, and he was grievously hurt. On the next day, Seiros waylaid Túrin as he set out from Menegroth to return to the marches. But Túrin overcame him, and set him to run naked as a hunted beast through the woods. Then Seiros, fleeing in terror before him, fell into the chasm of a stream, and his body was broken on a great rock in the water. But others coming saw what was done, and Mablung was among them. And he bade Túrin return with him to Menegroth, and abide the judgment of the king, seeking his pardon. But Túrin, deeming himself now an outlaw, and fearing to be held captive, refused Mablung's bidding, and turned swiftly away, and passing through the girdle of Melian, he came to the woods west of Sirion. Then he joined himself to a band of such houseless and desperate men as could be found in those evil days, lurking in the wild. And their hands were turned against all who came in their paths, elves and men and orcs. But when all that had befallen was told and searched out before the Thingol, the king pardoned Túrin, holding him wronged. In that time Beleg Strongbow returned from the north marches and came to Menegroth, seeking him. And Thingol spoke to Beleg, saying, "I grieve, Cuthalion, for I took Hurin's son as my son. Yeah, as my son. So he shall remain, unless Hurin himself should return out of the shadows to claim his own. I would not have any say that Túrin was driven forth unjustly into the wild, and gladly would I welcome him back, for I loved him well." And Beleg answered, "I will seek Túrin until I find him, and I will bring him back to Menegroth if I can, for I love him also." Then Beleg departed from Menegroth, and far across Beleriand he sought in vain for tidings of Túrin through many perils. Alright, so I'll do a little quick break here. So Hurin is now in the presence of Thingol, I suppose, in Menegroth. Right? Really? Oh no, that was just like the... Yeah, so there's a big grudge between, oh wow, Saros, there you go. Saros and Túrin were pretty much, Túrin was welcomed in, with Thingol and whatnot in the girdle of Melian and the protection, and Saros is just really butthurt about that apparently, and so he's just trying to like, he tries to like waylay him on like when he goes out into journey, and yeah, it's like a little like flashback, there you go, of what happens to Túrin's father, I suppose. A little like, oh, this is why Saros really hates this guy too. So, yeah, not really much to say. So, we shall now return to the story again. But Túrin abode long among the abode long among the outlaws, and became their captain, and he named himself I want to say Nathan because it's Neithan. That sounds very... It sounds right. I just... Maybe, yeah, let's just put like Nathan. Yeah, let's do Nathan. Nathan the Wrong. There we go. Very warily they dwelt in the wooded lands south of Tieglin. But when a year had passed since Túrin fled from Doriath, Beleg came upon their lair by chance. By night, it chanced that at a time Túrin was gone from the camp, and the outlaws seized Beleg and bound him and treated him cruelly, for they feared him as a spy of the king of Doriath. But Túrin, returning and seeing what was done, was stricken with remorse for all their evil and lawless deeds, and he released Beleg, and they renewed their friendship. And Túrin forswore thenceforward war or plunder against all save the servants of Angband. Then Beleg told Túrin of King Thingol's pardon, and he sought to persuade him by all means that he might return with him to Doriath, saying that there was great need of his strength and valor on the north marches of the realm. Of late the orcs have found a way down out of Tar Nufuin, he said. They have made a road through the pass of Anak. I do not remember it, said Túrin. Never did we go so far from the borders, said Beleg, but you have seen the peaks of the Crissaegrim far off, and to the east the dark walls of the Gorgoroth. Anak lies between them, above the high springs of Mindeb, a hard and dangerous road. Yet many come by it now, and Dimbar, which used to be in peace, is falling under the Black Hand, and the men of Brethil are troubled. We are needed there. But in the pride of his heart, Túrin refused the pardon of the king, and the words of Beleg were of no avail to change his mood, and he, for his part, urged Beleg to remain with him in the lands west of Sirion. But that Beleg would not do, and he said, Hard you are, Túrin, and stubborn. Now the turn is mine. If you wish indeed to have the Strongbow beside you, look for me in Dimbar, for thither I shall return. On the next day Beleg set out, and Túrin went with him a bow shot from the camp, but he said nothing. Is it farewell then, son of Hurin? Said Beleg. Then Túrin looked out westward, and he saw far off the great height of Amon-Rût, and unwitting of what lay before him, he answered, You have said, Seek me in Dimbar, but I say, Seek for me on Amon-Rût, else this is our last farewell. Then they parted in friendship, yet in sadness. Now Beleg returned to the Thousand Caves, and coming before Thingol and Melian, he told them of all that had befallen, save only of his evil handling by Túrin's companions. Then Thingol sighed, and he said, What more would Túrin have me do? Give me leave, lord, said Beleg, and I will guard him and guide him as I may. Then no man shall say that elven words are lightly spoken, nor would I wish to see so great a good run to nothing in the wild. Then Thingol gave Beleg leave to do as he would, and he said, Beleg Cuthalion, for many deeds you have earned my thanks, but not the least is the finding of my foster son. At this parting ask for any gift, and I will not deny it to you. I ask then for a sword of worth, said Beleg, for the orcs come now too thick and close for a bow only, and such blade as I have is no match for their armor. Choose from all that I have, said Thingol, save only Aron-Ruth, my own. Then Beleg chose Anglakel, I think that's how you pronounce it, Anglakel. And that was a sword made of great worth, and it was so named because he was made of iron that fell from heaven as a blazing star. It would cleave all earth elven iron. One other sword only in Middle Earth was like to it. That sword does not enter into this tale, though it was made of the same ore by the same smith, and that smith was Eol the Dark Elf, who took Aradel, Turgon's sister, to wife. He gave Anglicel to Thingol as fee, which he begrudged, for leave to dwell in Nan Elmeth, but its mate, Angurel, he kept, until it was stolen from him by Maeglin his son. But as Thingol turned the hilt of Anglicel towards Beleg, Melian looked at the blade, and she said, "There is malice in this sword. The dark heart of the smith still dwells in it. It will not love the hand it serves, neither will it abide with you long." "Nonetheless, I will wield it while I may," said Beleg. "Another gift I will give you, Cuthalion," said Melian. That shall be your help in the wild, and the help also of those whom you choose." And she gave him store of lembas, the waybread of the elves, wrapped in leaves of silver, and the threads that bound it were sealed at the knots with the seal of the queen, a wafer of white wax shaped as a single flower of Telperion. For according to the customs of the Eldalier, the keeping and giving of lembas belonged to the queen alone. In nothing did Melian show greater favor to Túrin than in this gift, for the Eldar had never before allowed men to use this waybread, and seldom did so again. Then Beleg departed with these gifts from Menegroth and went back to the north marches, where he had his lodges and many friends. Then in Dimbar the orcs were driven back, and Anglicel rejoiced to be unsheathed. But when the winter came, and war was stilled, suddenly his companions missed Beleg, and he returned to them no more. Alright. Little bit of a break here. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, well, this might be a little longer. Alright, so yeah, we get another kind of a shift over to Beleg Strongbow here, and he's pretty much trying to persuade King Thingol that he should go after him because Beleg and Túrin are pretty much best buds. And he asks for a sword. He gets Anglicel, but Melian's like, okay, well, the sword might be really nice and cool, but it seems to be cursed with the dark magic of Ale, which is, you know, he's a nasty guy. So, but yeah, pretty much that's kind of like what happens. Obviously, Thingol's just like, well, okay, like Beleg's done a lot of things for Thingol, so he's just like, okay, fine, you can go find Túrin, and you know, go with him and try to, you know, be the light and stop the darkness, and you know, things like that. So. Yeah, so then after that, now Beleg is off to go find Túrin again. So, we're going to go right back to the story once again. Now when Beleg parted from the outlaws and returned into Doriath, Túrin led them away westward out of Sirian's Vale, for they grew weary of their life without rest, ever watchful and in fear of pursuit, and they sought for a safer lair. And it chanced at a time of evening that they came upon 3 dwarves, who fled before them, but one that lagged behind was seized and thrown down, and a man of the company took his bow and let fly an arrow at the others as they vanished into the dusk. Now the dwarf that they had taken was named Mim. I think it's Mim, but whenever I say meme, it's like the memes, like memes. So I don't know. I'm gonna say Mim just for now, unless if you guys want to correct me. If it is Mim, then that would be really cool. I'm just gonna say Mim for now. So, okay, here we go. So they had, now the dwarf that they had taken was named Mim. There we go. And he pleaded for his life before Túrin, and offered as ransom to lead them to his hidden halls, which none might find without his aid. Then Túrin pitied Mim and spared him, and he said, "Where is your house?" Then Mim answered, "High above the lands lies the house of Mim, upon the great hill. Amon-Rûd is that hill called now, since the elves changed all the names." Then Túrin was silent, and he looked long upon the dwarf, and at last he said, "You shall bring us to that place." On the next day they set out thither, following Mim to Amon-Rûd. Now on that hill stood upon the edge of the moorlands that... some of the shadow came through the book. Now on the hill stood upon the edge of the moorlands that rose between the vales of Sirion and Narog, and high above the stony heath... Sorry, I was going to say hearth. I can't read today, guys. I'm very stumbly today. And high upon the stony heath it reared its crown, but its steep grey head was bare, save for the red saragon that mantled the stone. And as the men of Túrin's band drew near, the sun westering broke through the clouds and fell upon the crown, and the saragon was all in flower. Then one among them said, "There is blood on the hilltop." But Mim led them by secret paths by the steep slopes of Amon-Rûd, and at the mouth of the cave he bowed to Túrin, saying, "Enter into Bar in Danwed, Danwit, yeah, the house of ransom, for it shall be called. And now there came another dwarf bearing light to greet him, and they spoke together and passed swiftly down into the darkness of the cave. But Túrin followed after, and came at length to a chamber far within, lit by dim lamps hanging upon chains. There he found Mim kneeling at a stone couch beside the wall, and he tore his beard and wailed, crying one name unceasingly, and on the couch there lay a third. But Túrin, entering, stood beside Mim and offered him aid. Then Mim looked up to him and said, "You can give no aid, for this is Kim, my son, and he is dead, pierced by an arrow. He died at sunset. Ibn, my son, has told me." Then pity rose in Túrin's heart, and he said to Mim, "Alas, I would recall that shaft if I could. Now, bar in Dandwith, this house shall be called in truth, and if ever I come to any wealth, I will pay you a ransom of gold for your son, in token of sorrow that would gladden your heart no more." Then Mim rose and looked long at Túrin. "I hear you," he said. "You speak like a dwarf lord of old, and that I marvel. Now my heart is cooled, though it is not glad, and in this house you may dwell, if you will, for I will pay my ransom." So began the abiding of Túrin in the hidden house of Mim upon the Amon Rood, and he walked on the greensward before the mouth of the cave, and looked out east and west and north. Northward he looked, and descried the forest of Brethil, climbing green about Mammon Obel in its midst, and thither his eyes were drawn ever and again. He knew not why, for his heart was set rather to the northwest, where league upon league away on the skirts of the sky it seemed to him that he could glimpse the mountains of shadow, the walls of his home. But at evening Túrin looked west at the sunset, as the sun rode down red into the hazes above the distant coasts, and the vale of Narog lay deep in the shadows between. In the time that followed, Túrin spoke much with Mim, and sitting with him alone, he listened to his lore and the tales of his life. For Mim came of dwarves that were banished in ancient days from the great dwarf cities of the east, and long before the return of Morgoth, they wandered westward into Beleriand. But they came diminished in stature and in smithcraft, and they took to lives of stealth, walking with bowed shoulders and furtive steps. Before the dwarves of Nogrod and Belegos came west over the mountains, the elves of Beleriand knew not what these others were, and they hunted them and slew them. But afterwards they left them alone, and they were called Noegith Nibbin, the petty dwarves, in the Sindarin tongue. Okay, there you go. They loved none but themselves, and if they feared and hated the orcs, they hated the Eldar no less, and the exiles most of all. For the Noldor, they said, had stolen their lands and their homes. Long ere King Finrod Felagund came over the sea, the caves of Nargothrond were discovered by them, and by them its delving was begun, and beneath the crown of Amon Rood, the bald hill, my bad, the slow hands of the petty dwarves had bored and deep in the caves through the long years that they dwelt there, untroubled by the grey elves of the woods. But now at last they had dwindled and died out of Middle-earth, all save Mim and his 2 sons. And Mim was old, even in the reckoning of dwarves, old and forgotten. And in his halls the smithies were idle, and the axes rusted, and their name was remembered only in ancient tales of Doriath and Nargothrond. Alright, quick little break here. So obviously Túrin gets to find rest, I suppose rest, in Mim's little house on Amon Rood, which is pretty cool because, I don't know, you don't really see a lot of that, I suppose, like the race of mankind mingling with the race of dwarves. I don't know if that's like really like something that like the race of mankind has, because they're always just kind of like bent on, not really bent on, but they were created and made for like a sort of strife in between like all of the races, I suppose. Like they're always there that how do I word it? Mankind is always there that kind of like divides everything in Beleriand, it seems like. But on this occasion, Túrin and Mim end up becoming like best friends, which is kind of funny, but it's also really cool. So Túrin gets to stay and listen to Mim's stories of his history and the lore of the dwarves, and it's really cool. And apparently Mim is like super old, so that's pretty cool. If you get to like stay in the house of a really ancient dwarf, there's gonna be stories every night. So Very cool stuff. Alright, we're getting back to it here. But when the year drew on to midwinter, snow came down from the north, heavier than they had known it in the river vales. There you go. And Amon-Rud was covered deep, and they said that the winters worsened in Beleriand as the power of Angband grew. Then only the hardiest dared stir abroad, and some fell sick, and all were pinched with hunger. But in the dim dusk of a winter's day there appeared suddenly among them a man, as it seemed, of great bulk and girth, cloaked and hooded in white, and he walked up to the fire without a word. And when men sprang up in fear, he laughed, and threw back his hood, and beneath his wide cloak he bore a great pack. And in the light of the fire, Túrin looked again on the face of Beleg Cuthalion. Thus Beleg returned once more to Túrin, and their meeting was glad. And with him he brought out of Dimbar the dragon helm of Dor-lómin, thinking that it might lift Túrin's thought again above his life in the wilderness as the leader of a petty company. But still Túrin would not return to Doriath, and Beleg, yielding to his love against his wisdom, remained with him, and did not depart, and in that time he labored much for the good of Túrin's company. Those that were hurt or sick he tended, and he gave to them the lembas of Melian, and they were quickly healed, for though the great elves were less in skill and knowledge of the exiles than the exiles from Valinor, in the ways of the life of Middle-earth they had a wisdom beyond the reach of men. And because Beleg was strong and enduring, far-sighted in mind as in eye, he came to be held in honor among the outlaws. But the hatred of Mim for the elf that had come into Bar and Dunwith grew even greater, and he sat with Ibn his son in the deepest shadows of his house, speaking to none. But Túrin paid now little heed to the dwarf, and when winter passed and spring came, they had sterner work to do. Who knows now the counsels of Morgoth? Who can measure the reach of his thought, who had been Melkor, mighty among the Ainur of the great song, and sat now, a dark lord upon a dark throne in the north, weighing in his malice all the tidings that came to him, and perceiving more of the deeds and purposes of his enemies than even the wisest of them feared, save only Melian the queen. To her often the thought of Morgoth reached out, and there was foiled. And now again the might of Angband was moved, and as the long fingers of a groping hand the forerunners of his armies probed the ways into Beleriand. Through Anak they came, and Dimbar was taken, and all the north marches of Doriath. Down that ancient road they came that led through the long defile of Sirion, past the isle where Minas Tirith of Finrod had stood, and so through the land between Malduin and Sirion, and on through the eaves of Brethil to the crossings of Teaglin. Thence the road went on into guarded plain, but the orcs did not go far upon it, as yet, for there dwelt now in the wild a terror that was hidden, and upon the red hill were watchful eyes, of which they had not been warned. For Túrin put on again the helm of Hador, and far and wide in Beleriand the whisper went, under wood and over stream and through the passes of the hills, saying that the helm and bow had fallen in Dimbar had arisen again beyond hope. Then many who went leaderless, dispossessed but undaunted, took heart again, and came to seek the two captains. Dor Quarthol. Yeah, I'm going to say Quarthol. The land of bow and helm was in that time named all the region between Teaglin and the west march of Doriath. And Túrin named himself anew Gorthal the Dread Helm, and his heart was high again. In Menegroth, in the deep halls of Nargothrond, and even in the realm of Gondolin, the fame of the deeds of the two captains was heard, and in Angband also they were known. Then Morgoth laughed, for now by the dragon helm was Túrin's son revealed to him again, and ere long Amon-Rud was ringed with spies. Alright, little bit of a break there. I feel like I'm very slumped over when I'm reading. I get so into the story. So yeah, as Túrin is living pretty comfortably with Mim, lo and behold, Beleg returns, hooray! And so he actually ends up finding him on Amon-Rud, and as he does come back, Mim is very upset because Beleg is there. So he pretty much has like secret councils with his son that he hates him being there. And then obviously Beleg and Túrin are reuniting, I suppose, and they're kind of more closer than ever, just because Beleg doesn't leave this time. So yeah, Mim is pretty upset with with the whole the old friendship coming back together again, and Túrin's almost not really like ignoring Mim, but he's just more focused on the friendship of Beleg. So that's always interesting. And then there's a winter that comes through, and then obviously there's the orcs are going through, and obviously the two captains are probably just slaying orcs left and right. I would assume Beleg and Túrin, which would be really cool to see. Just kind of them just going throughout the lands and like, like sneak on an encampment of orcs and slaughter them in the night or something like that. It's pretty cool. I like to hear about it. So on we go with the story. In the waning of the year, Mim the dwarf and Ibn his son went out from Bar en Danwid to gather roots in the wild for their winter store, and they were taken captive by orcs. Then for a second time, Mim promised to guide his enemies by the secret path to his home on Amon Rud, but yet he sought to delay the fulfillment of his promise, and demanded that Gorthal should not be slain. Then the orc captain laughed, and he said to Mim, "Assuredly, Túrin son of Hurin shall not be slain." Thus was Bar en Danwid betrayed, for the orcs came upon it by night at unawares, guided by Mim. There many of Túrin's company were slain as they slept, but some fleeing by an inner stair came out upon the hilltop, and there they fought until they fell, and their blood flowed out upon the Saragon that mantled the stone. But a net was cast over Túrin as he fought, and he was enmeshed in it, and overcome, and led away. And at length, when all was silent again, Mim crept out of the shadows of his house, and as the sun rose over the mists of Sirion, he stood beside the dead men on the hilltop. But he perceived that not all those that lay there were dead, for by one his gaze was returned, and he looked in the eyes of Beleg the elf. Then with hatred long stored, Mim stepped up to Beleg, and drew forth the sword Anglicel that lay beneath the body of one that had fallen beside him. But Beleg stumbled up, seized back the sword, and thrust it at the dwarf, and Mim in terror fled wailing from the hilltop. And Beleg cried after him, "The vengeance of the house of Hador will find you yet." Now Beleg was sorely wounded, but he was mighty among the elves of Middle-earth, and he was moreover a master of healing. Therefore he did not die, and slowly his strength returned, and he sought in vain among the dead for Túrin to bury him, but he found him not, and then he knew that Hurin's son was yet alive, and taken to Angband. With little hope, Beleg departed from Amon Rud and set out northward, toward the crossings of Tiglin, following in the tracks of the orcs, and he crossed over the Brithiac and journeyed through Dimbar towards the pass of Anak. And now he was not far behind them, for he went without sleeping, whereas they tarried on the road, hunting in the lands and fearing no pursuit as they came northward. And not even in the dreadful woods of Tar-Nufuin did he swerve from the trail, for the scale of Beleg was greater than any that have been in Middle-earth. But as he passed by night through that evil land, he came upon one lying asleep at the foot of a great dead tree. And Beleg, staying his steps beside the sleeper, saw that it was an elf. Then he spoke to him and gave him limbas, and asked what fate had brought him to that terrible place. And he named himself Gwindor, son of Gwilyn. Grieving, Beleg looked upon him, for Gwindor was now but a bent and fearful shadow of his former shape and mood, when in the Nerniath Arnoediad that lord of Nargothrond rode with rash courage to the very doors of Angband, and there was taken. For few of the Noldor whom Morgoth captured were put to death, because of their skill in forging and in mining for metals and gems. And Gwindor was not slain, but put to labor in the mines of the north. By secret tunnels known only to them, the mining elves might sometimes escape, and thus it came to pass that Beleg found him, spent and bewildered in the mazes of Tar-Nufuin. I guess just a little break here is super quick, is that on the way Beleg is trying to find Túrin after the betrayal of Mim the dwarf with the orcs and stuff like that. I don't know if Mim really cares about his home after that. This is the second time. At first he finds Túrin and his company, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, just follow me to my house. It's really cool." And then when Túrin's there, then Beleg shows up and Mim's really upset. It's like, well, I mean, you let him there, you let him stay. Oh, sorry, excuse me. And then the second time is when he gets captured by orcs, and he's just like, "Hey, I'll just show you to my house." And then that's the second time. Like, does he not care about Amon Rud and stuff? And its history and all that he's been through? I don't know. It's just kind of weird. Mim's a weird character, but I still kind of enjoy this part of the tale. And obviously with the betrayal comes a really bad battle. and most of them are slain, and then Túrin gets captured, and now Beleg's after him. But instead of finding him, he finds Gwindor, son of Gwilyn, who is apparently one of the elves that were taken captive by Morgoth, and now he's pretty much kind of escaped, I suppose, because he's lost in the forest. So, and that's kind of the gist of it. So, we're going to get right back to it once again. So here we go. And Gwindor told him that as he lay and lurked among the trees, he saw a great company of orcs passing northwards, and wolves went with them. And among them was a man whose hands were chained, and they drove him onward with whips. Very tall he was, said Gwindor, as tall as are the men from the misty hills of Hithlum. Then Beleg told him of his own errand in Tarnufuan, and Gwindor sought to dissuade him from this quest, saying that he would but join Túrin in the anguish that awaited him. But Beleg would not abandon Túrin, and despairing himself, he aroused hope again in Gwindor's heart. And together they went on, following the orcs until they came out of the forest on the high slopes that ran down to the barren dunes of Anfaglith. There within sight of the peaks of Thangorodrim, the orcs made their encampment in a bare dell as the light of day was failing, and setting wolf sentinels all about, they fell to carousing. A great storm rode up out of the west, and lightning glittered on the shadowy mountains far away, as Beleg and Gwindor crept towards the dell. When all in the camp were sleeping, Beleg took his bow, and in the darkness shot the wolf sentinels, one by one, and silently. Then in great peril they entered in, and they found Túrin, fettered hand and foot, and tied to a withered tree, and all about him knives had been cast at him, were embedded in that trunk, and he was senseless in a sleep of great weariness. But Beleg and Gwindor cut the bonds that held him, and lifting him, they carried him out of the dell. Yet they could bear him no further than to a thicket of thorn trees a little way above. There they laid him down, and now the storm drew very near. Beleg drew his sword Anglicel, and with it he cut the fetters that bound Túrin. But fate was that day more strong, for the blade slipped as he cut the shackles, and Túrin's foot was pricked. Then he was aroused with a sudden wakefulness of rage and fear, and seeing one bending over him with the naked blade, he leapt up with a great cry, believing that orcs were come again to torment him. And grappling with him in the darkness, he seized Anglicel, and slew Beleg Cuthalion, thinking him a foe. But as he stood, finding himself free, and ready to sell his life dearly against imagined foes, there came a great flash of lightning above him, and in its light he looked down on Beleg's face. Then Túrin stood stone still and silent, staring on that dreadful death, knowing what he had done. And so terrible was his face, lit by the lightning that flickered all about them, that Gwindor cowered down upon the ground and dared not raise his eyes. Yeah, so little quick, another quick break here. Yeah, so this is the slaying of Beleg, which is a terrible, terrible thing that happens. It's one of the tragedies, I suppose, of the chapter of Túrin, or the story of Túrin. Beleg was such a great guy. He's so loyal to Túrin, and of course, it must have been like pitch black in that night, or since they're in the forest, I suppose it would be even darker, and only the lightning can provide all that light. So in a way, yeah, I can kind of see if it was like an accident, and of course, Túrin being held captive by, orcs and stuff with torment would, of course, want to fight immediately if he gets stabbed immediately. And of course, Anglicel, being the cursed blade that it is, as Melian kind of predicted, was like, yeah, well, that's the fate of Anglicel, the cursed sword. So it is very tragic, and I really enjoyed Beleg because he's such a cool and loyal character, no matter all the hardships that he has to go through. And obviously with Gwindor, he witnessed all that too, but then he looks at Túrin's face, which is probably just mixed of like anger against himself and deep sorrow, and then it's just flashing lightning. So it's like, that's a scary image. So of course he's just like, oh no. So anyway, we're gonna go back into to the story here. But now in the dell beneath, the orcs were aroused, and all the camp was in tumult, for they feared the thunder that came out of the west, believing that it was sent against them by the great enemies beyond the sea. Then a wind arose, and great rains fell, and torrents swept through the heights of Tarnufuan. And though Gwindor cried out to Túrin, warning him of their utmost peril. He made no answer, but sat unmoving and unweeping in the tempest beside the body of Beleg Cuthalion. When morning came, the storm had passed away eastward over Lothlan, and the sun of autumn rose hot and bright. But believing that Túrin would have fled far away from that place, and all trace of his flight be washed away, the orcs departed in haste, without longer search, and far off Gwindor saw them marching away over the steaming sands of Anfaglith. Thus it came to pass that they returned to Morgoth empty-handed, and left behind them the son of Hurin, who sat crazed and unwitting on the slopes of Tar Nufuin, bearing a burden heavier than their bonds. Then Gwindor roused Túrin to aid him in the burial of Beleg, and as he rose as one that walked in sleep, and together they laid Beleg in a shallow grave, and placed beside him Belthranding his great bow, that was made of black yew wood. But the dread sword Anglicel Gwindor took, saying that it would better that it should take vengeance on the servants of Morgoth that lie useless in the earth. And he took also the limbust of Melian to strengthen them in the wild. Thus ended Beleg Strongbow, truest of friends, greatest in skill of all that harbored in the woods of Beleriand in the elder days, at the hand of him whom he loved most. And that grief was graven on the face of Túrin and never faded. But courage and strength were renewed in the elf of Nargothrond, and departing from Tar Nufuin, he led Túrin far away. Never once as they wandered together on long and grievous paths did Túrin speak, and he walked as one without wish or purpose, while the year waned and winter drew on over the northern lands. But Gwindor was ever beside him to guard him and guide him, and thus they passed westward over Sirion and came at length to Aethel's Ivrin, the springs whence Narog rose beneath the mountains of shadow. There Gwindor spoke to Túrin, saying, "Awake, Túrin, son of Hurin Thalion. On Ivrin's lake is endless laughter. She is fed from crystal fountains, unfailing and guarded from defilement by Ulmo, Lord of Waters, who wrought her beauty in ancient days." Then Túrin knelt and drank from that water, and suddenly he cast himself down, and his tears were unloosed at last, and he was healed of his madness. There he made a song for Beleg, and he named it Lair Cu Beleg, the song of the great bow, singing it aloud heedless of peril, and Gwindor gave the sword to Anglicel into his hands. And Túrin knew that it was heavy and strong and had great power, but its blade was black and dull, and its edges blunt. Then Gwindor said, "This is a strange blade, and unlike any that I have seen in Middle-earth. It mourns for Beleg even as you do. But be comforted, for I return to Nargothrond of the house of Finarfin, and you shall come with me, and be healed and renewed." "Who are you?" said Túrin. "A wandering elf, a thrall escaped, whom Beleg met and comforted," said Gwindor. "Yet once I was Gwindor, son of Gwilyn, a lord of Nargothrond, until I went to the Nerniath Arnoediad, and was enslaved in Angband." "Then you have seen Hurin, son of Galdor, the warrior of Dor-Lómin?" said Túrin. "I have not seen him," said Gwindor, "but rumor of him runs through Angband that he still defies Morgoth, and Morgoth has laid a curse upon him and all his kin." "That I do believe," said Túrin. And now they arose, and departing from Aethel Ivrin, they journeyed southward along the banks of Narog, until they were taken by scouts of the elves, and brought as prisoners to the hidden stronghold. Thus did Túrin come to Nargothrond. Alright, little break here again. So yeah, Gwindor becomes the new best bud. I was just like best bud. Because Beleg, now that he is slain, Gwindor kind of just gets like that spur of, I guess, compassion and that really, really strong fellowship that Túrin had with Beleg. Because Túrin basically just becomes super depressed on their way back. And Gwindor is like, okay, listen, I'm going to lead you here. We're going to go to Nargothrond, and we're going to kind of just be there, rest there until you're better. And then we'll go from there. And Túrin kind of like just saunters through it and whatever. But then he's just like, Gwindor's like, oh, like just wash up in this river. Supposedly it's like, you know, I guess blessed, I suppose, by Ulmo with Aethel Ivrin. There you go. And I guess it works because Túrin kind of just sinks himself into the river, I suppose, into the waters, I suppose, and something inside him just kind of like snaps, and he lets everything out, and he's like, okay, good to go now. So, oh yeah, and then Beleg gets Anglicel, So now he pretty much holds that, which is pretty cool. You get Anglicel, and then you get the Dragon Helm of Dor Lumine. Super cool. And, hold on a minute. I'm gonna reach it out here. Okay, here we go. So obviously the Dragon Helm of Dor Lumine is... Hold on, I gotta get it. Man, the glare of the books sometimes are really tricky to match with... Well, anyway, this is what I'm gonna be reading eventually. Children of Hurin. So that's a fun story to go through. And it has pictures, so it's even better. Okay, so back to the story. At first his own people did not know Gwindor, who went out young and strong, and returned now seeming as one of the aged among mortal men, because of his torments and his labors. But Finduilas... Oh, I think the books move. But Finduilas, I should say, daughter of Orodreth, the king knew him and welcomed him, for she had loved him before the Nerniath, and so greatly did Gwindor love her beauty that he named her Feylivrin, here you go, which is the gleam of the sun on the pools of Evrin. For Gwindor's sake, Túrin was admitted with him into Nargothrond, and he dwelt there in honor. But when Gwindor would tell his name, Túrin checked him, saying, I am Agarwain, the son of Umarth, which is the bloodstained, son of ill fate, a hunter in the woods, and the elves of Nargothrond questioned him no more. In the time that followed, Túrin grew high in favor with Orodreth, and well nigh all hearts returned to him in Nargothrond, for he was young and only now reached his full manhood, and he was in the truth the son of Morwen Eladwin, to look upon, dark-haired and pale-skinned, with grey eyes, and his face more beautiful than any other among mortal men in the elder days. His speech and bearing were that of the ancient kingdom of Doriath, and even among the elves he might be taken for one from the great houses of the Noldor. Therefore many called him Adonedel. Yeah, Adonedel, the Elfman. The sword Anglicel was forged anew for him by cunning smiths of Nargothrond, and though ever black its edges shone with pale fire, and he named it Gurthang, Iron of Death. So great was his prowess and skill in warfare on the confines of the guarded plain, that he himself became known as Mormegel. Yeah, I guess Mormegel. I don't know. Something like that. The Black Sword. And the elves said, the Mormegel cannot be slain, save by mischance, or an evil arrow from afar. Therefore they gave him dwarf mail to guard him, and in a grim mood he found also the armories a dwarf mask all gilded, and he put it on before battle, and his enemies fled before his face. Then the heart of Finduilas was turned from Gwindor, and against her will her love was given to Túrin. But Túrin did not perceive what had befallen, and being torn in heart, Finduilas became sorrowful, and she grew wan and silent. But Gwindor sat in dark thought, and on a time he spoke to Finduilas, saying, Daughter of the house of Finarfin, let no grief lie between us. For though Morgoth has laid my life in ruin, you still I love. Go whither love leads you, yet beware. It is not fitting that the elder children of Iluvatar should wed with the younger, nor is it wise, for they are brief and soon pass, to leave us in widowhood while the world lasts. Neither will fate suffer it, unless it be once or twice only, for some high cause of doom that we do not perceive. But this man is not barren. A doom indeed lies on him, as seeing eyes may well read in him, but a dark doom. Enter not into it, and if you will, your love shall betray you to bitterness and death. For hearken to me, though he be indeed Agarwain, son of Umarth, his right name is Túrin, son of Hurin, whom Morgoth and Angband and those kin he has cursed. Doubt not the power of Morgoth Boglir. Is it not written in me? Then Finduilas sat long in thought, but at the last she said only, Túrin, son of Hurin, loves me not, nor will. Now when Túrin learnt from Finduilas of what had passed, he was wrathful, and he said to Gwindor, In love I hold you for rescue and safe keeping, but now you have done ill to me, friend, to betray my right name, and call my doom upon me, from which I would lie hid. But Gwindor answered, The doom lies in yourself, not in your name. When it became known to Orodreth that the Mormegel was in the truth the son of Hurin Thalion, he gave him great honor, and Túrin became mighty among the people of Nargothrond. but he had no liking for the manner of warfare, of ambush and stealth and secret arrow, and he yearned for brave strokes in battle in the open, and his counsels weighed with the king ever the longer the more. In those days the elves of Nargothrond forsook their secrecy, and went openly to battle, and great store of weapons were made. And by the counsel of Túrin the Noldor built a mighty bridge over the Narog from the doors of Felagund, for the swifter passage of their arms. Then the servants of Angband were driven out all the land between Narog and Sirion eastward, and westward to the Nenning and the desolate Fallis. And though Gwindor spoke ever against Túrin in the council of the king, holding it an ill policy, he fell into dishonor, and none heeded him, for his strength was small, and he was no longer forward in arms. Thus Nargothrond was revealed to the wrath and hatred of Morgoth. But still at Túrin's prayer his true name was not spoken, and though the fame of his deeds came into Doriath and to the ears of Thingol, rumor spoke only of the Black Sword of Nargothrond. And that's where we're gonna stop for at least today. It's still 50 minutes, and this is still halfway through the chapter, so a lot happens, obviously. So Túrin is obviously very well liked in Nargothrond, but not everybody likes him, and even a friend as close as Gwindor ends up betraying him, kind of. It's not really a betrayal, it's more of just like, hey, why did you do that, dude? Like, I get that Gwindor is in love with Finduilas, there you go, and but then obviously she turns her love away from Gwindor, and he's just like, hey, look, listen, like Túrin, he's just a guy, he's just a human, he's gonna die in like 80 years or whatever, because he's still young and whatnot, but he pretty much tries to warn her that he's a human, he's gonna die eventually, but you should love me instead, because I'm an elf and I can, live for more years than he. And she's just like, well, listen, he doesn't love me, and I guess that's that. So I don't know, but then obviously Gwindor gives her his true name, Túrin. So yeah, I guess it's kind of like a betrayal of friendship. So that's kind of that's a bummer. But otherwise, yeah, he's pretty much a very well-respected guy in Nargothrond, and the Black Sword of Mormegil pretty much slays all the orcs in the area, and they start to kind of become afraid of him and his scary-looking blade, I suppose. And that's kind of like where I'm going to stop in the chapter, at least, just because it is very long. The next chapter will also be probably another 50, maybe an hour, just because I like to take my time with these things. So that is the end of this chapter. So let me know if you guys enjoy my continuing narration. Once again, this is a personal project of mine, so I will continue with it. I was thinking of doing another addressing Ardian figures, but I know that you guys don't really I guess enjoy that stuff as much, I suppose, so I'll probably just kind of keep it out of the show for now. Otherwise, yeah, just let me know if you enjoy the show, what you enjoy about the show, if you do. Anything that you'd love to put down in the comments about Tolkien stuff, that would be really, really cool. Make sure to like it if you enjoy this very long journey of mine that will last for a lot longer, whether it be months or years or however long this project takes. It's a very fun thing for me to do. And it's really cool that I get to have some people that listen and kind of go along with the journey with me. It's really, really cool and really fun. So I hope you guys reach out to me over on that email, thelandsofordea@gmail.com. I would really, really love to talk with you guys and for you guys to be part of the show. Again, this is coming from like a big nerd. Obviously it started with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, stuff like that. But getting into the lore and the history and the expansions of Middle-earth and Arda, it's really fun. So I'd love to have you guys on the show, especially. So, and of course, as always, the last thing that I got to note, be sure to check out my own fantasy book called The Lands of Ordea, obviously from the email, The Lands of Ordea. Obviously that has a lot of lore and history, and I've worked a lot of time into it as well. It's going to be part of a 5-book series, so I have written the first one, currently writing the second, so I would appreciate if you guys snagged a copy, and it'd be really cool. So, and I don't know, if you guys want, and this is just me reaching out to you guys here, is that if you guys want me to read from my book, that would be really cool too. I'm always open for that. It might be separated from, you know, this main channel, or I don't know, I'll see from if you guys actually reach out to me or not. So yeah, so with that all being said, just stay tuned for the next episode, and may the light of Elbreth be with you all. Farewell!